Welcome back everyone, and we are revisiting this topic because you guys in the comment section below, or rather below the video of Cold War that we did, where we talked about performance between Ampere and RDNA 2 with the 6800 XT, 6800, 3070, 3080. Now the one thing that you guys asked about a lot was, well, Keith, you did the testing with all at ultra settings with all of the ray tracing stuff turned on, but what if you, well, turned it down? Would the 6800 XT and 6800 fare better if you were to turn things down? Well, that is a good question because there are three different settings. There's sun shadows, there's local source shadows, and there's ray traced ambient occlusion. I kept saying global illumination in the last one. I was very wrong on that. It was ambient occlusion. Not really sure why I messed that up, but we're going to correct that here today. But we're going to kind of focus it down. We're going to look at the 3080 and the 6800 XT at 1440p. And the biggest reason is because we just want to get an idea of the scaling. So that'll give you an idea. If you go back and look at the other video with the 3070 and the 6800, you should see similar scaling on those particular GPUs. Now, we're not worried about DLSS in this particular one because you're going to really, to get the benefits of that, you're going to need to go to 4K. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a CPU limited situation here, as we did even with the 5900X. Speaking of which, throw the specifications for the test bench up on the screen as we get ready to talk about the results. Now, what we did was we did break these down, so the charts are going to be a little bit congested. I did color code them so you can find them pretty easily, and I separated the 3080 and the 6800 XT in the top and the bottom parts of the graph. Now, the big thing here is we're wanting to see scaling across each setting from medium, high, ultra, and off, of course, and of the sun shadows, the local spot shadows, as well as the ambient occlusion, to see which one of these has the biggest impact for the performance. Now, I can tell you, like, visually speaking, in the single player campaign, I like all of them on. Now, medium to ultra, it's not going to be a huge difference visually. If you start to like pixel peep, you'll be able to tell them. So my recommendation is, if you want to get every little bit of performance, if you're on AMD, you're going to want to just go with medium on all of them if you want all of them. And then NVIDIA, you just turn on DLSS. Turn them to ultra, turn on DLSS to quality mode, and you're going to be hard pressed to see the difference there. So just take advantage of everything that you can to get the most amount of performance. Multiplayer, turn it all off. Min-max, get as high as FPS as you want to, or as you can, because that's going to help you in multiplayer scenarios. You're not going to win because of, you know, ray trace shadows or ambient occlusion. So before anybody goes on about nobody wants to play Call of Duty competitively at lower FPS, absolutely hear you there. Definitely turn these things off. I wish they had like a different settings, like, you know, multiplayer and then single player, so that they didn't carry over. Anyway, let's get into the results here. So ray traced sun shadows. What kind of impact can you expect? Well, at 1440p, you can see here the 3080 and the 6800 XT both see a significant hit. However, you can see that the scaling from medium, high, and ultra on the 3080 isn't that big of a delta. However, over on the 6800 XT, if you run it at medium, you're still staying at 70 FPS, down from 119, and if you go all the way to ultra, you're dropping at 9 FPS, which is pretty substantial at that point. You're talking more than a 10% performance increase if you wanted to go with just this ray traced sun shadows. You can see over here the 3080 is maintaining fairly consistent performance once you turn it on. It's not taking much of a hit. Medium to high is negligible. The push to ultra, you know, it drops you down 4 FPS from 80 down to 76. So something to take into consideration there. This is probably one of the biggest immediate impact on the appearance of the game that you can do is with the sun shadows, especially in the outdoor levels. But that's where you get with that on scaling. So this is what you guys wanted to see. Now, what about local shadows? Moving into that, there's very little impact. The local shadows are, now admittedly, this is in one scene of the game. It's the fractured jaw, the same section that we tested for the previous video. And this is mostly outdoors, so probably not a whole lot of impact here. Maybe later in the game where you're indoors, you'll see a bigger impact. But honestly, not much of an impact from turning it on. So if you want to have something ray traced and you don't want to have really any impact on your performance, local shadows, that'll help. That'll be really big on things like tables, legs, furniture, weapons, those kind of things, like character models, big things like that. Whereas the sun shadows is going to hit everything in the scene. This is going to be very local to light sources within the scene. So it should be a lot less impactful, and clearly it is. Now, ambient occlusion is kind of a big one because, quite frankly, it changes the way shadows are in static objects, in like bookcases, those kind of things, and it's visually striking, and it can also, like in the game, where in the scene where it's all on, you can see a lot better in the area, so you're not going to have like shading in places that you would normally just have light would penetrate and kind of impact that area, so it's not going to be quite as dim in some places. And some things are going to be darker than they would otherwise because it should be darker. So performance-wise, you're seeing a very similar hit in this one as you did with the sun shadows, where on medium you retain a good bit of the performance, but if you drop down raise the settings up towards ultra, you're seeing a pretty big impact there. So actually it's almost exactly the numbers as the ray trace sun shadows, just not quite as much. Now that kind of gives you an idea of how each one of them impact the game performance on each graphics card. But what about when you pair them all up? So you add all three. Now what we did, instead of spending 2 days going through each setting, a combination thereof, we added all of them, and then we did all of them set to medium, high, and ultra. Now you can finagle around however you want to. Some you can go higher, like clearly with the local shadows, it's not as as impactful. So maybe you could raise that one up to ultra, keep the other ones to medium. But here on screen, you see the difference that you're going to get here, and that shows the 3080 with everything at ultra. It's going to go down to 72 FPS. The minimums don't really get impacted a whole lot once you turn it on. They kind of just stay there. Now the 6800 XT, if you want to go to medium, you're going to get that. You're going to hit 60 FPS on average. So if you're okay with that on, the single player campaign, and you want all of the, ray tracing effects turned on, you're going to hit that 60 FPS. But if you go past there, you see a really big drop off. You don't see near the drop off with the 3080. You see it go from 78, 76, 72, which is fair enough of an impact. Minimum, again, don't make a huge big difference, but you look at the 6800 XT, you go from 60 to 55 to 48. Now, that's a pretty substantial impact. Going from 60 to 48 is a lot bigger of a deal going from 78 to 72. So you could find yourself with the 3080 it being a fairly smooth experience, especially if you're at 1440p and you're just, you got a variable refresh rate monitor. It's going to feel pretty smooth. Now, moving over to 6800 XT on a variable refresh rate 1440p, you're going to find yourself in a few instances where it's going to feel sluggish. You may get that stutter depending on the variable refresh rate window or FreeSync window of that monitor. So something you want to keep in mind here. So guys, there you have it. There is the scaling with these two cards. You can kind of translate that over to the 3070 and 6800. It'll be very similar, just of course lower FPS. So if you want to check out that video, you know where to find it. Hope this gave you guys a little bit better of insight. Clearly, when you load it down, the 3080 is handling multiple effects a little bit better, or quite a bit better, than the 6800 XT. If you want us to revisit again with that DLSS, I'm just telling you guys, you're going to want 4K DLSS, or else it's not going to make a big difference. It didn't make a huge difference. It helped, but not as much as you'd think it would. So you guys know what to do if you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, comment. Let me know if revisiting this was something you enjoyed doing, or you like, Keith, get it right on the first time. So we're trying to find a way to balance the coverage of this to get it to you quickly, but also give you a good amount of information to go off of, because a lot of people ask, Keith, why don't you put the 2080 Ti in there, because that's Gen 1 ray tracing for the 6800 and that's Gen 2 for the 3080. Truth is, if this had come out sooner, we would have been using the 2080 Ti, but these are both vendors' current GPUs. This is where they're going with. If I did the 2080 Ti, I'd have to throw something like the 5700 XT in there and just be like, well, it didn't work at all. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Catch you in the next one.